My name is Ashley Hansen. I'm a 32-year-old housewife. My husband, Sean, is 38, and sadly, he's both a mama's boy and verbally abusive. We are a family of 4. Our 10-year-old son, Tom, and our 8-year-old daughter, Mia, complete our home. Ever since getting married, I've been living with Sean's parents. It's been 10 years, and for most of that time, I've been subjected to my mother-in-law's endless demands. Every time I try talking to Sean about it, he brushes me off, saying, "Just listen to what my mother says. My mother-in-law, Zelda, treats me more like a servant than a daughter-in-law. Every morning, I wake up to her yelling from her room, calling me to help her get out of bed. The day starts with me pulling her up and guiding her to the bathroom, then helping her change clothes before moving her to the living room for breakfast." Zelda has had mobility issues for the past 5 years. Her legs are stiff in the mornings, making it hard for her to move. Although she manages a bit better by afternoon, it's still not easy. But the physical help is nothing compared to the emotional toll. She loves to boss me around. She'd call me saying, "Bring me tea, Ashley, and make it quick." And if the tea isn't ready by the time she's done eating, I hear her sharp voice cutting through the air. "Why didn't you boil the water beforehand? You know I always have tea after my meals." And yet, just yesterday, she told me not to boil the water until she finished eating. It's like she enjoys making me fail. Before her health declined, Zelda and I used to do everything together. We shopped and cooked together, and things were fine. But as her walking became more difficult, her behavior towards me worsened. The loving way she used to call me Ash turned into a cold, "Hey," or worse, airhead. Despite all this, I tried to stay patient, remembering the better times we once had. But it hurt. The woman who once cared for me had turned into my tormentor. I tried consulting Sean, hoping he would help, but all he ever said was, "Just do what my mother says." He never listened to my concerns, so I started recording videos to document what was happening. I wanted proof that I had told him everything, that I wasn't just making things up. One night, after another exhausting day of following Zelda's unreasonable commands, my sister-in-law Susan called. "Hey, Susan is coming back home because she's having a baby. Make sure you take care of her properly," Zelda told me without a hint of emotion. I didn't even know Susan was married, let alone pregnant. "Mother, when did Susan get married?" I asked, confused. "I just found out too. She's coming back, so you better make arrangements," Zelda snapped. I understood then that to her, I was nothing more than a servant. I judged that asking any further questions would only lead to more yelling, so I just nodded and left to buy ingredients for dinner. When I returned, I was greeted by piles of cardboard boxes at the entrance. My son Tom ran up to me, his face troubled. "Mom, Aunt Susan says she's going to live here. She also said she's taking my room. Do something." My daughter Mia came up right after, her eyes wide with worry. "They're saying I have to share a room with Tom. There's no space for 2 desks, Mom." I went to Zelda, hoping this was all a misunderstanding. "Mother, is what the children told me true?" I asked. But before I could finish, she cut me off. "Yes, hurry up and move Tom's things to Mia's room. And for dinner, Susan wants steak, so get that ready too." The sudden changes felt like a punch to my gut, but before I could process it all, Susan stormed into the room, glaring at me. "Hey, Ashley, who do you think you are to question Mom? You're just a parasite. Do as she says and take care of her." Her words were sharp, and the kids, frightened, hid behind me. I took a deep breath and said, "I will discuss this with Sean." I led Tom and Mia to their room, and once we were alone, they asked, "Mom, when is Aunt Susan leaving?" "She's scary." Even as I prepared dinner, the children clung to me, unwilling to be alone. I couldn't wait for Sean to come home, so I called him. "Did you know Susan is moving back in to have her baby here?" I asked. He sounded surprised. Clearly, he hadn't heard about it either. But after I explained everything, including the children's room situation, all he said was, "If Mom wants Tom to give up his room, then just do it. If Susan wants steak, make it. It's natural for her to be upset, and you need to explain that to the kids." His response broke me. I tried to reason, but it's impossible to fit 2 beds and a desk in their room. "What should we do?" He simply replied, "Figure it out yourself," and hung up. Tom, seeing my face, tried to comfort me. "It's okay, Mom. We'll endure it until Aunt Susan leaves." Mia nodded. "Yeah, we can manage for a little while." Their resilience touched me, and I hugged them tightly. "Thank you," I whispered. "We'll endure it, but after Susan leaves, things will go back to normal. I promise." That evening, Sean came home with a cake box in his hand, and for a fleeting moment, I thought maybe it was for the children as an apology for the inconvenience. The kids' eyes lit up at the sight of the cake, but Sean shattered the moment when he said, "This is for Mom and Susan." Mia's eyes welled up with tears. "But we haven't done anything wrong," she sobbed, and Sean ignored her, handing the cake over to Susan. I tried to change the subject, swallowing my own disappointment. "Susan, congratulations on your pregnancy. When are you due?" I asked, smiling. She looked at me, then said, "October." It was only May, and she barely looked pregnant. I realized then that she planned to stay for the entire duration of her pregnancy, and dread settled into my stomach. Zelda asked, "When are you getting married, Susan?" "What's your partner like?" Susan fumbled. He's the president of a company, really busy, so he can't come here. But he wants me to be here for my health." I felt my heart sink. It was clear she was lying. Something about her story didn't add up. I resolved to get to the bottom of it. The next day, after finishing my morning chores, I told Zelda that I had some errands to run and stepped out of the house. My first stop was Susan's apartment building. By chance, the janitor was working nearby. "Excuse me, do you know if Susan Hansen lives here?" I asked. He looked at me with concern. "Are you a friend of hers?" he asked. "Yes," I lied. "I've been trying to reach her, but I haven't been able to." He nodded. "I've also been trying to contact her. She's 6 months behind on rent. I was just about to unlock her apartment to check if she's all right." He handed me the key and we opened the door together. The apartment was a mess, with letters and bills piled up on the floor, all marked urgent. As we moved further in, we found a man lounging on the couch. He looked up, startled. "Who are you?" he asked, reaching for his phone. The janitor quickly explained the situation. "I'm the janitor, and we couldn't reach Ms. Hansen, so we came to check on her." The man relaxed slightly. "I'm Nick. I'm dating Susan," he admitted. He went on to explain that Susan had told him to wait here until I moved out, because her brother was planning a divorce. My blood ran cold. Susan was plotting to get Sean to divorce me and throw me and the kids out. Trying to keep my voice steady, I asked, "I heard Susan was pregnant. Is the baby yours?" Nick looked genuinely confused. "Pregnant? No, that's impossible. We've never had that kind of relationship," he said, shaking his head. He went on to talk about his life, his failed marriage, and how he had ended up relying on Susan. It became clear that his life was in shambles, and he had nowhere else to go. After leaving the apartment, I returned home. Susan was crying in the living room, with Zelda comforting her. I pretended not to notice and went to my room to change. Not long after, Susan barged in without knocking. "Call my partner for me. My phone's blocked, and he's not answering my calls," she demanded. I refused, and she stormed out, clearly angry. That evening, Zelda confronted Susan. "I got a call from your janitor. Is it true you haven't paid your rent and there's a man living in your apartment? Is he your boyfriend?" Susan broke down, admitting everything. "I wanted to start a life with him, but he left to go back to his family," she sobbed. Zelda looked at me, her eyes filled with disdain. "This is all your fault. You're just a parasite. If you had helped, maybe he would have stayed." Her words stung, but they also made me realize that there was no hope left in this family for me or my children. I decided then and there that it was time to leave. I gathered the kids and told them, "I'm going to divorce your father, and we're leaving this house." Tom smiled. "That's probably for the best, Mom." Mia added, "Grandma and Aunt Susan are scary. I want to leave too." I asked if they would be all right without their father, and Tom said, "Dad was never really on our side, so it's okay." Mia nodded in agreement. Their strength gave me the courage I needed. When Sean came home, he was furious. "How dare you upset Mom and Susan?" "Didn't I tell you to just listen to Mom?" he yelled. I handed him the divorce papers. "I am listening, Sean. I'm leaving," I said calmly. He looked at me, sneering. "Where will you go? You're a jobless parasite. You can't support 2 kids." I didn't respond. Instead, I called my brother, who had been aware of everything that had been happening. "Can you come with a truck tomorrow to help us move out?" I asked. He assured me he'd be there, and for the first time in a long while,